If you love XCOM, if you are like me and loved Midnight Suns way more than the regular internet discourse loved Midnight Suns, you are really going to enjoy this game. I've been spending some time with Capes, this new turn-based tactical superhero game by Spitfire Interactive, and I'm just here to tell you that you're gonna love this game if you love this genre. I want to tell you what's different with this game, why it's worth playing, about the story, and really if it's worth your money. You know, I wanna help you make the right decision because this is not a super cheap game, but it's also not super expensive. It's in about $35 to $40 on the Steam store right now. So let's talk about Capes. As I've said before, huge Midnight Suns fan. I just love them. That game is extremely underrated in my opinion, and I made a whole video about why it's sort of a masterpiece that you will never play. I want to make more videos about that because it's so good. This game reminds me a lot of it, obviously because the premise is superheroes in turn-based tactical combat. There's a lot of differences though with the combat, and I want to tell you about that in a minute. First though, let's talk about this developer, Spiritfire Interactive. Like, this is technically their first game, honestly, which is impressive, but they are comprised of a lot of folks who made the Hand of Fate games. I didn't play those games. It was sort of like like a deck building type game. I didn't play them, but they were successful. They made 2 of them, somewhat successful. You know, single to double A type games. That's what this is, as you can see. And really, the main premise of this, I'm surprised that I haven't seen any other reviews talk about the fact that there is a lot of sort of Watchmen-esque stuff going on with this. The whole aesthetic of this game is very comic book. That's the whole thing that's going on here. And the main premise, essentially, is very similar to Watchmen, is that superheroes used to be a big thing, and now the public has turned against them, and they are exiled and being hunted. And so you have, essentially, this group of superhero vigilantes called Capes that are trying to save other Capes, other superhero vigilantes, from being essentially murdered by this corporation that's trying to clean up and destroy all of the Capes. And that includes others with powers. So you have supervillains on one side of things, and then you have superheroes on the other side of things. So it's very Watchmen-esque in that way, which is cool. And you can see here in the cutscenes, it's very comic book style. They're going for that same font and the chat dialogue and everything and the speech bubbles. That's the thing that they're going for. The cutscenes are pretty good. The voice acting is fine. The writing is okay. You know, it is campy, and it's meant to be campy. This is maybe one of my critiques here is when we're coming to the story part of it. I don't really mind the camp as much, but I think that this animation that they do here when they're back at their base, grouping up with the heroes, is a little bit of a missed opportunity. In fact, instead of having them do this looping, moving, breathing animation, I would almost rather they're static. It probably would have allowed it to feel a little bit higher end than not, but it's just like a very small gripe. And I do want to say that I'm only 4.5 hours into this game, so these are first impressions. And the more I played this game, the more I got into it. There's a lot of tutorials at the beginning. It's a little bit of a slow start. It takes a while for you to start to understand how the powers can all work together, which leads us into the combat. That's the real reason that you come to this. It's the combat. And you're seeing the system here and how it works. So essentially, it's just like XCOM or Midnight Suns. So you have different actions that you can take. You see down there in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 at the bottom of the screen. These are the main powers that they have. And as you might imagine, each one of the heroes that you recruit has a different skill set and really use on the battlefield. You start out with these 3. Facet, it's like highly defensive. He's like literally a punching bag, and he creates these crystallized growths on himself to be able to take more damage. Out in the world, as you can see, creating growths to block spaces. Spaces are an interesting thing. I'm going to bring this up in a second because this is a really big difference here. Then you have Rebound, who doesn't have a lot of health, but she backstabs like crazy, and she is a champ at doing a ton of damage. And then you have Mindfire, who uses telekinesis powers and things like that, and hits a little bit harder than everybody else. That's how it works. But of course, unlike Midnight Suns, there's not a card system here. There's a skill tree, and then you continue to level up and unlock different skills that go down to your action bar during the course of it. Each hero also has an ultimate skill. So you can see the ultimate right now for Mindfire is unlocked. You can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bars that got filled up. So each hero has an ultimate. For Mindfire, he lays out a barrage of just like stuff he's shooting out at people. For Rebound, she just goes around to each enemy and just slices them. These are really cool, but there's a very specific thing that they need to do a certain amount of times to be able to unlock this skill. So you see that there's 6 bars down here. That means that Mindfire was able to unlock it during the course of battle. With him, he casts a vulnerable spell on people, and every time that vulnerable enemy is hit, he gets a charge towards his ultimate. Rebound, it's all about backstabs. Every time that she backstabs an enemy and injures them, she gets a little bit added to her ultimate gauge. And Facet, he gets a point added to his gauge every time that he gets hit. It's incentivizing you to get damaged, because that's his thing. He is like the punching bag to try to take the attention away from the other two, which don't have a lot of health and can do more damage. And you see down here, you see the chains above a couple of these moves down here. That is a really cool feature of this game, which allow for superhero synergy powers. So essentially, if you're really close to Rebound, she teleports, and so you can use an action point and she can teleport you much farther than you would be able to go on your own. Or she can team up with Facet and she takes one of his crystals and she hurls it while she's backstabbing, and then it does extra damage. Or she can team up with Mindfire and then have Mindfire turn an enemy around while she backstabs, even if she's not in a position to backstab. Which you want to backstab, obviously, because you want to unlock the ultimate skill. You just saw it happen right there. So it gets a little bit complicated, but definitely not too complicated to like turn you off from the game. Now, one thing that's really interesting in here is movement, the movement system. So you see up here how there's 3 dots above movement. That means that this character, this is Facet, can move 3 spaces. It's like a board game with movement. So there'll be squares on the ground. We're used to the squares on the ground from these types of games. But these squares actually designate a spot where you can move to. You can use them at any point in your turn. It's not like you can only move once, like in Mario Rabbids or really any other of these types of games. You can use them whenever you want. You can just only use up to the amount of move points that you have, move squares that you have. And the enemies are the same way. So when you hover over enemies, it shows how much they can move, and then that dictates where they're going to go. It actually says where enemies are going to hit next. If you hover over them, it says, hey, they're going to be facing in this direction. They're going to attack this person on your team. So you get to choose ahead of time where you're going to position yourself. And enemies also have weapons, and you really need to focus on disarming them because the weapons do a lot more damage. Disarm is a whole separate skill. So there's a lot of layers to this. But what's interesting with the movement is that you're not going to see a lot of enemies with guns, for example, shoot you all the way across the minimap. It just won't happen. They're going to need to take a certain amount of steps forward to be able to be in range, and the ranges are on the smaller side. Enemies hit really hard, and you don't hit all that hard. However, range is really the biggest X factor in this. So you have the ability to position yourself strategically so that you can stay safe and then close enough so that you can get to them. And then with Facet, you get to put these growths in the middle of the map, which block squared off spaces. So it basically cuts off the route, because it's like a board game. There's only a fixed way that you can go. It blocks off routes that different enemies can go to get to you. So you see here in this one, and I'm glad I recorded this one because this is really the one that this is really the battle that turned it around for me with Capes. I had so much fun with this battle, which was against like 20 different enemies, or 15 or something. There were a lot of different enemies, and it was really able to stretch the way that I used all of the different abilities and the way that they work together. I was forced to use every single one of my abilities. So you see over here, I put up all those growth things in the way to create something of a barricade so that enemies would have to go around these boxes to get to me. This is not something you would see in other games of this genre. Obviously, there's always different things in the way, but in general, movement is usually a little bit more free-flowing than this, but the limiting nature of it really makes a huge change in how you interact. Obviously, it also means that you can't move to those places when it's blocking your way, and so you are limited, but enemies are limited too, and that's really interesting, which makes somebody like Rebound quite interesting, because you're going to see now she's about to launch her ultimate. She can teleport, so she has a lot more freedom of movement, so she doesn't have a lot of health, but she does have a lot of freedom of movement and teleportation, so she's able to do a ton of damage really quickly if you're just able to protect her otherwise. And, you know, Facet can protect her. She can protect herself by just simply getting away. Like, there's so many different ways to do it. I mean, it does remind me a lot of Midnight Suns because it doesn't have that cover system of XCOM or Mario Rabbids. It's not about getting behind cover. That's not what it's about. Similar to Midnight Suns, you move to be in the right position to launch the right attack and to be close enough to be able to launch the right attack. And that is cool. And the superhero piece of it is cool as well. I mean, it feels a little strange a bit because these are not superheroes that we know or have ever heard of, and their abilities, some of them are strange, like the crystallizedness guy. That's weird. But, and you know, Rebound being obsessed with backstabs and teleporting, like, it's different. But ultimately, there is enough different in this game for me to say that it really justifies it for you. And I've seen a couple of Steam reviews because, you know, this is really mixed on Steam right now, the last I checked. Yeah, Steam reviews are mixed. And, you know, a lot of people are saying things like this one that I'll read to you right here says, my complaint is that it feels tactically restrictive. There doesn't seem to be multiple ways to handle a mission, and it feels more like solving a puzzle with a predetermined solution, right? And he's got 5.2 hours on record. I agree with him for some missions. There's a couple of missions that are like that are more tutorial based, but I think he needs to get a little further on in the game. And he may be further than me because I'm a little less than 5 hours into the game. What I'll say is when I was playing this mission specifically, I truly felt like everything got so messy that there was way more than just one different way to deal with this. Way more when you think outside the box. Other reviews are saying the writing is atrocious. I would disagree with that. You know, I don't think it's atrocious. I think it's a little bit campy, but it's fine. You know, it's fine. It's not aiming to be super, super deep. You know, I think that in general, people are too tough on writing of games. Don't even get me started about Midnight Suns and how angry people were about all the stuff you had to do in the house. Who cares? It was fun, and the combat was incredible. So I really want to encourage you to give this game a shot, because I don't love that the reviews are mixed on this game, because I think it's much better. I think it's punching above its weight. I think it's more fun than people are giving it credit for. I think there's like a fair amount of parroting of different opinions going on here, which I don't necessarily agree with. You know how it is. This is why I don't like to read a lot of reviews before I play games, because it really can color the way that I look at a game. And I did feel a little bit mixed on it myself in the first couple of hours. I was like, what is this going to be? Because I was so excited for this. But once you dig into it and you start really seeing how unique some of the different mechanics are, you deal with the fact that it has campy dialogue and you lean into it instead of saying that you're going to sort of deal with it, you can really let yourself have a lot of fun with this game, because there's just a lot going on in this combat that really makes you think, especially if you're a fan of this genre. Hey, at the time of this rating, I'm still a new channel. If you got value from this, it helped you make a decision about whether to play this or buy this or whatever it is, a like and a subscribe goes a long way. Okay, anyway, I'll see you in the next video. And don't forget to have fun.